personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, this is Debbie Reynolds of the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. So I have with me today Jennifer Mailander, who's the Deputy General Counsel, and she heads data privacy and cybersecurity for Fannie Mae. Is that correct?
It is. Hello.
Excellent. Well, I have been thrilled to know you over these years, and I was so happy and excited that you said yes to do this podcast. I love to tell people two stories. So one is, well, actually three stories. So one is how we met. One is sort of kind of my thoughts of you in general, and then you are partially responsible for my Data Diva moniker.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah, so we met. We were on a panel in New York for the Masters Conference. I think it was in 2017, because I think it was like a year before GDPR came out. And I was telling Gail Goddard, because I had her on the show, that was the first privacy panel I had been on where it was all women. And so we are a very diverse group of women, and we just all sort of clicked together. I think, it was a fantastic panel. I wish we had recorded it because I thought it went really well. So it was me, you, Gail Goddard, Kiko Park, Amy Tall, and we've all sort of kept in touch with each other, and we do little things together, which is awesome over the years. And you're one of these people. There are only two people in my professional life, and you're one of these people that if you call me and say something, it's like it's done. So you're very wise and very smart. So I always take your advice very seriously. And you've suggested some really wonderful things to me. So one of the things that you suggested to me, you sent me an email, which was about the Quorum Initiative. So the Quorum Initiative is a women's networking group. And at the time, they were trying to inaugurate a chapter in Chicago. And so you're part of the DC chapter, right?
Right.
And you were like, oh, Debbie, you should totally go to this thing. And I thought, it's one of those moments, okay, I'm going to go to this thing because, Jennifer says it's awesome. And so I did go to the inaugural event that they had, and it was like a workshop about sort of LinkedIn and branding and stuff like that. And so we had got into groups. I think we were like in pairs or two or something. And then people were like walking around, trying to get us to sort of hone our elevator pitch and things like that. So one of the women who was facilitating was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. And so I told her my elevator pitch, and she said, oh, you're like the Data Diva. And we just laughed about it. And then I thought it was funny because the person who was in my group was Yvette Pena, she's like the head of diversity for AARP. And she was like, oh my God, you should totally use that. And, because at first I was really bashful about it. And then I thought, well, this woman is a reporter. This is probably a really interesting, fun way to sort of sum up what I do. And it's been very popular. So
it worked. Yeah.
That's what you've done. You've helped me with that, definitely.
Thank you. That is a lovely feedback. So thank you. I appreciate that. And that is very cool. First of all, I love the Data Diva, and I love you. So this is fantastic. I'm glad that that came together. You never know where your actions are going to take you, right?
That's true. It's always good to do networking and listen to smart people like you. So I'm glad I was smart enough to do that. Well, I just want to get into some of the questions that I have for you, my burning questions. First of all, you've held many privacy roles in public, private, and government organizations. When did you realize that privacy was going to become like an industry into itself and a key focus for organizations?
For the past 20 years or so, I have worked for technology companies, and I think it's really that experience that helped me understand that there's something here. It's privacy, but it's, the power and breadth of technology today that is so impactful. It's the significance of data in general, and I'm speaking to the Data Diva, so I think you get that. And of course, privacy and security are huge components of that. And then, just partnering with your business peers and your technology peers to understand the business and what's being done, and figuring out all of a sudden, wow, there's a lot of data being collected. I worked at Corporation Service Company, or CSC, and that is a business company that is a legal services, business services, digital services company. And so they essentially help companies manage information. So they have a lot of data. And I supported sales and technology. So I would, work with external customers and work on contracts. And all of a sudden we were getting questions like, where do you store my data? What do you do with it? Who has access? And in those days, we didn't have a CISO at that company. We had a technology leader, right? And so he would be on the phone and he'd explain, and then I'd learn from him, and great guy. And those questions rapidly evolved into 300-page questionnaires, or 300 questionnaires that you had to give. And so then I went to work at a company called ComScore. And so this whole thing got sort of turbocharged for me. ComScore is data analytics and cross-platform measurement. So they measure, they have user panels that tell them what they do and what they do on the internet. They have OTT, or over the top. They collect data, which is essentially like your program is an OTT program, right? It's streaming media, TV data, movie data, and then GDPR came about, and so all of a sudden, when you're talking about privacy and data, it was no longer just about social security number, passport number, driver's license. GDPR said, what? It's not always so clear. It's not always so black and white. It might be a data element by itself is not in what they refer to as, personal data. It might be that three fields together create something that is personally identifiable. So, there's just this evolving definition, and then my interest in technology, that's kind of how it happened. I often say that I stumbled into it, and so I'm pretty lucky in that sense, but it's a great space to be in right now.
Yeah, it is. So basically you're just combining your interest and skill, and it just sort of, snowballed in a good way.
Yeah.
So in Chicago, snowballs aren't that great, but in a good way, we snowballed, right? You did a webinar not long ago about how to keep data privacy top of mind and in certain and uncertain times. So how has COVID impacted, your focus on privacy for better or for worse?
Probably a little bit of both. As a person, I try not to think of, is this better, is this worse, because I get all wrapped up in the emotion of something I probably have no control over anyway. So my approach in life is just try to deal with stuff.
Right.
I think it's obviously there was the personal impact that all of us have gone through and probably still are going through. I remember the last time I went out to dinner at a restaurant and had a beverage. And so, we're coming up on that year anniversary, which is I love going out to eat. And then of course there's the work stuff, right? Like the first few weeks after we were all working from home, you had to understand, wow, we're not the only ones working at home. There are third parties that we rely on. They're working from home. Are they safe? So there's that sort of interaction that we had to deal with. There was understanding employees are now working from home, and that employees have coworkers. My world, I'm very fortunate. It's my husband and I and the cat. So we both cook. But suddenly you might be having a fairly private conversation with someone about something rather sensitive, and you could have a child walk in, a partner, a spouse walk in. So, trying to set up parameters around that so that employees remember to lock their keyboard if they walk away. You don't want your kids to be playing on your laptop. So setting up parameters for that, even things like reminding managers that COVID wasn't just like any other illness. And, when you found out initially, at least one of your peers might have had COVID, you wanted to remind the manager that's probably not something you want to be talking about to the team, whereas you would have had the flu or an appendicitis, because we weren't sure what kind of stigma was going to be associated with it, right? So, and then we've had bursts of, okay, we're going to go back into the office. Okay, no, we're not going back into the office. And how do we prepare the office, and what kind of funky new technology can we implement? Like, let's automatic temperature takers, find social distancing measures, which are not that effective, I think. And then, fun things, trying to entertain employees, but everyone wants to post videos of their family and their kids on your workspace. And you're like, maybe we shouldn't be doing that, because so dealing with those kinds of issues, it's been fascinating. And I think, every day or every week seems to bring new questions related to how we're dealing with this. But so how was that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was great. I know that obviously corporations have to deal with OSHA, so I think this creates like a whole new wrinkle in terms of how people deal with OSHA regulations in the workplace. Have you experienced that at all?
Well, we follow, Fannie is a large legal department, and so I work very closely with our employment lawyers. So that's their sphere. We follow CDC guidelines really closely, and any opinions that come out of either of those groups. So that's how we've been managing. Thank goodness there are other teammates that I have that we interact with pretty regularly on that sort of thing.
Yeah. The CCPA has had a tremendous impact, I believe, on organizations. What, if anything, surprised you about the CCPA in terms of adoption of operational changes within your organization?
Yeah. So I started at Fannie in November of 2018, and literally like the month after I got there, we had the business doing outreach, like, okay, we've heard about this law. What do we need to do? And so I think my initial reaction was I was surprised how on top of it the business was. They all knew about it. They wanted to be prepared. They knew they had a year at that point. So I was floored at just how, because I think GDPR had set the stage for most people if you have a global interest. And so I was just floored at how, okay, what do we need to know? We're ready to go. The challenge, of course, with CCPA was the statute and the regs didn't get finalized right away. So just doing a lot of presentations and then representing to those same groups to kind of say, okay, this is what we know as of now. I think I attended every CLE that I could on this. Fannie Mae has a very great privacy structure. So I work in legal, and my team, so we cover the legal components. And then there is a privacy office, and the chief privacy officer, Libby Brzozowski, manages the privacy office, and they cover, it's under compliance and ethics, that group. So we work really closely together, but they're very good about taking control of the operational components and the monitoring components. And so I think what was surprising to me was, trying to develop processes and procedures, which I am a part of that process, when you don't really know what the final rules or regulations are. That was really, really challenging. I think there are also challenges, or were challenges, because it's California. You'll get a number of requests from citizens outside of California who want the same governing rules. And so you have to figure out as a company how you want to respond to that, if you do want to respond to that. I think with privacy today, transparency is extremely important as it relates to consumers. And so that's our general guideline that we like to follow, but some companies may not feel that way, and just trying to balance that. And then I think what it shows me too is it is just amazing how much privacy and data are integrated with every aspect of business.
Right.
I mean, everything tech, because you're using new technologies and everybody wants to collect data. And it's just, you know, you have to, and business doesn't sit still. So you may
No.
develop a process and a procedure, but if the business changes, which it does all the time, you have to then possibly change your process and procedure. So it
That's
just,
true.
it always goes back down to communication, right? Which is so essential, but it's hard when you're in a large organization or you're incredibly busy. So
That's true. Very true. You've been a champion of women and men in executive leadership in their career development. What advice would you give anyone who wants to pivot into data privacy or accelerate their career in data privacy?
wow, that's a great question. So I, this is an amazing practice area. It is intense. It's a relatively new practice area compared to things like tax law, litigation. Um, that's great because that's why women of color and like you and me, and that's why we are able to work in this space and you know, get higher up the scale than we might in a traditional legal practice. And yours kind of, you do multi-practice areas, I think, outside of legal too, right? Um, it's so rapidly evolving, it's fascinating, and it's huge. So I have a new team member, a new attorney that works with me, and she's like, wow, what do I focus on? Because there are so many tentacles in privacy and cybersecurity. So I think that you need to find what you like to do. And I think that's always the best way to start, and find and make sure you don't try to take it all on. At least for
Right.
me, that's where I've found the most success, I think. Um, and then I think understanding technology is really important.
Right.
And there are so many programs right now that are great for, especially for lawyers, just trying to get some basics down. You need to be able to understand. And there's actually now, we know, an ethical requirement that we need to do that as well and understand. I think you have to be very comfortable with saying, I don't know, because I will
Right.
tell you on a daily basis, my stomach gets in a knot and I have anxiety because I don't know the answer. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And that may happen 10 times a day. So I just am very comfortable with saying, I don't know. That's a really good question. And then asking lots of questions after that. Like, well, what are you trying to accomplish? What data are
Right.
you collecting? Where does it go? Who has access? And then my last thing, and thank you for the lead in, because I think this ties in. But with any career, you need to network. So you
That's
need to
right.
network in your company, but I really think it's important, and think that I've had my most insightful revelations for myself when I network outside of the company. So
Mm-hmm.
I get to meet people like you who call me, 5 years later and say, "Hey, let me come on my podcast." But I can also call when I have one of those days where I don't know. I can call and say, "Hey, we talked on a panel X number of years ago, and this is what I'm facing. Have you seen anything like this?" Right? And it just gives you also, I think, a sense of who you are outside of your organization. To me, it's kind of like going outside of your family to get counseling or something, right?
Right.
You don't, people in your company know you and they categorize you just like we all do. But if you
Mhm.
step outside, you get a chance to sort of be your true self or reinvent yourself, and step away from your day-to-day grind, and just hear and learn from all sorts of interesting people.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, and advocate for people to do that. So a lot of people do think, oh, if I'm networking within my company, that's fine. But I mean, you're right. Like especially you do a certain job within a company, that job is not you as a person. So networking is about you as a person and sort of all the different facets of yourself. And so for me, I love to get advice from people who aren't in my industry because I feel like they have more of a clean slate and they have a fresh eye to things. Even when I'm writing something or I'm doing a speech or something, I may send it to someone who's in a completely different, know, field because I want to know, does it make sense? Is it easy to understand? Do I need to change it in some way? And then two, you just never know what will happen with, your network. You never know. I have so many people call me up, out of the blue and want to network, and it's amazing. So people don't network enough, I don't think. And some people misunderstand. They think, for me, I think networking is like doing a garden. So you plant a seed and you cultivate that seed over time, and you're building relationships over time. You never know where that's going to take you.
Yeah. There's one other component I would add, and you reminded me of this, I'd be interested. But I think mentoring is a phenomenal way, and it does exactly what you just said. So I approach mentoring that I say we have to both understand what we each want out of it.
Hmm.
And I expect to learn as much, if not more, than the person that I am so supposedly mentoring. Um, and this past summer, I had an amazing mentee who is Fannie Mae has a summer intern program that we split with Venable. So the legal interns work for Fannie Mae, and then they also work for Venable for part-time. So it's a really good way to see what do you really want to do when you grow up, right? And so I had a young African-American woman, 1L at Michigan, and wow, what an incredible time to have someone of color mentoring me, because I'm ignorant. I didn't know what I didn't know, and it was a phenomenal experience. But I think you really have to. I love it because it's about talk. It's to your point. Go talk to someone who does something different, because it's amazing what you don't know and what you walk in with our preconceived notions, right?
Yeah, totally. Just open your mind. You definitely helped me with that. You introduced me actually to someone who's one of my dear colleagues now, which is John Berghoff. I'm going to embarrass him by mentioning his name on the podcast. He's fantastic, phenomenal, such a nice, smart man, and we had a great friendship. It was funny because many years ago we ended up having lunch, and it was around my birthday, and I was telling him I wanted to do this trip, and I didn't know whether I should do it, and he was like, yes, you totally do it. And in retrospect, now that we can't travel, I'm so glad I took his advice, because I was going to go to London or something for my birthday, and I just decided to do it because John convinced me I should do it.
Oh, see, he's a good man. He's one of my favorite people.
Yeah,
Also, a wise mentor to me. So, yeah, and very funny too.
he is very, very funny. Um, what is one thing that you learned in dealing with data privacy at a large organization that you think will help businesses on their data privacy journey?
Um, there are resources.
Mm-hmm.
that that makes a big difference, right? And so I think it's also very good about helping you elevate yourself, because there are resources in mid-sized or small organizations. You're very often tasked with doing it all. So, if I in my previous jobs, there wasn't a privacy office to handle implementation and monitoring. That often fell to the legal department,
Mm-hmm.
let alone being responsible for the legal components. So, and those are legal components, but it's nice when you've got a team that their job is to go um, set up the processes and procedures to implement something. So I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's a constant reminder to step up your game. Um, I think there's sort of this, because um, the people that I work with are incredibly talented, and there's healthy competition, and I think it's just a reminder to step out again, step outside of the weeds.
Right.
um, I hear a theme that I've been talking about here, but I think it's so easy to get entangled in the day to day, because there's too much of it for all of us.
Right.
And it's a way to step back and really focus again, like get to your priorities. What are they? And really that works for any size organization. I think you really have to know, what are your objectives for the day? What are your objectives for the week, the month, etc.
Yeah. Right. Because it's so much, you can get in the weeds and it can be overwhelming. So that makes sense. Totally makes sense. So after the GDPR passed, we're seeing many different countries starting to enact, data privacy regulations, and obviously the CCPA came after that. Do you think that move toward more data privacy regulation around the world will have an impact on a possible federal data privacy legislation in the U.S.?
A girl can dream.
Yeah.
So, I am certainly hopeful. Again, I go to my example. When I walked into Fannie Mae, I had business people asking me about CCPA because they had heard about GDPR. So yeah, I think it does. Absolutely. When we see other countries smaller countries passing significant legislation with privacy protections for consumers, yeah, I think it absolutely will. I think we've got, with Vice President Harris, I think she's got strong chops in this space in terms of the work that she did in California as the Attorney General. And so, I'm certainly hopeful. I think we live in a global economy, and the sectoral approach of the U.S. may have served its purpose at one point, but it's really too many of the laws conflict.
Yeah.
And we need something to help us. I'm not saying it will be a panacea, but it would definitely help us, I think.
I think so too. I think, like you said, we do have a global economy, and I think a lot of the action that will happen will be around commerce, because I feel like that moves the needle the most. When you're talking about this, it's not kind of hearts and minds and feel good stuff. It's like, can I do business X, Y, and Z? So I think the pressure is rising, and I'm hoping that there'll be things put in place where like you said, things are conflicting or things are outdated. And then I don't want us to be so in love with the past. Maybe it worked in the past, but, being able to have things that are more modern is pretty important, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. What, so we've been watching kind of the Schrems cases, the Schrems 1 and 2 cases play out in the EU over the years. And do you imagine that that these cases will have even a larger impact on the way people think about like data transfers internationally?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, well, I mean, they sort of have to. So Fannie Mae is a U.S. based company, right? So I'm not dealing with international stuff in the way that I would have in a previous job or two. But I think that, this goes to, again, our sort of our comments that we've already made. We need that foundational federal law, and I think that will then hopefully flow over to helping us figure out how to work internationally, because like you said, it's all about commerce, and we need the ability to exchange data back and forth comfortably. I think for the international audience, they need to understand better what the Cloud Act means to them, and any control we might be able to put around that, because that's the real concern, right? It's like federal government's going to come in and grab our data, even if it's not in the U.S. So that expanded it and took it off. But every contract I see, because everyone uses third parties, and most third parties now have entities that do work outside of the U.S. So there's always the standard contractual clauses now. Right now, that's about Fannie Mae is a single entity. We don't have subsidiaries, so that for us is that's there. But so yeah, it's definitely. I had a meeting a couple weeks ago with a larger company that does international internet-like things, and they're very concerned, right? Because this has huge implications for them about every data transaction, right? So.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep our eyes on. That's for sure. So your role is interesting at Fannie Mae. So you cover cybersecurity and privacy. So I'm wondering, how do you find kind of this dual responsibility, and how is it in terms of collaboration between kind of these different groups?
So I don't know how they're not connected, because everything, anytime if we have a privacy event, that, the first thing we need to do is it paper? Is it online? Anytime there might be a technology blip or some sort of, is question about whether or not something has happened, which of course you and I know that happens every day in every company, and you have to figure out is this significant or is this just a blip that happens every day in every company? So they are so interrelated, which I, again, love. That's sort of my passion. In my past life, I was the CISO, and I walked arm in arm on everything. We did presentations together. We had and again, I think this can be done really at any size company, but we would have monthly meetings between legal, InfoSec, and we tie in the business. And I might do a presentation on contracts and what they mean, and the CISO might do something on software as a service, or and then the business might do one on here's how our products, this is what companies love about our products. So in my company now, again, it is all about communicating and connecting with your peers so that you can get stuff done and keep it moving. And so I know I interact with the CISO regularly. But my day-to-day activities are with his direct reports, and we connect, have lunch. I'm just starting to have meetings to find out what their goals and objectives are for the year and how we can better support them. But, it's hard when we're remote, but it's setting up a time and just chatting and trying to connect where you can, because seriously, I can't do my job without them, right? I mean, it's so important. You're talking about threat detection and response and cloud security, and those are all pieces of what we do every day. So does that answer kind of?
Oh,
yeah.
Definitely. I'm sure the cybersecurity people will love to hear that answer, because I think, a lot of us have existed in organizations where things are very siloed, and I feel like privacy can't thrive unless we break down those walls. So I'm happy to hear that you're doing that.
I can't do my job otherwise. Plus, when I moved into Fannie, I don't have a financial services background, so I needed people to tell me what I needed to know, because I didn't really understand what the company did. So it's always helpful to ask people for guidance, because most people like to help, I think.
That's true. So if it were the world according to Jennifer, and you could wave your magic wand and decide how data privacy regulation goes, either here in the US or anywhere around the world, what would be your wish?
So there are like 4 components to this. Okay, so this is would I rule the world kind of question, which I love. So we've touched on that we need a federal law governing privacy, because we've just got, the data breach notification requirements are crazy. They're so nuanced, and it's, you need charts to be able to make sure you know who you have to give notice to and when. State privacy laws are now headed in that same direction, and that's, it's silly. It's a waste of good effort, and we can make it better, and we can make privacy better and security better if we had one standard for both privacy, data breach notification, and InfoSec standardization, right? Like what constitutes security. I think this would also then help us align better across borders, because
That's right.
I don't think we'll have a law across the world. So I think we need to, if we can shore up our own house here, it will make it easier to do that cross communication across the globe. And that's very important for our companies to survive. It is a global economy, as we said. As I get more greedy, I'd like to live in a world like many other parts of the world, where privacy is an individual right.
Right.
On par with our Bill of Rights, because I think it's extremely important. I think that has grown. I've seen that more now in the past year than I realized. And I think that would help our society recognize the importance of privacy. Sometimes I hear way too many people dismissive about, oh, so what? I don't care. I signed up for an app and they follow me. I don't really care. But I do care, and I think we need better controls around that. So if we had that privacy right, I think we need to understand this emerging technology world that we live in, because we don't. I certainly don't. And that is going to have huge ramifications for privacy and data and uses in a way that I don't think we have any concept. One of your podcasts a couple of weeks ago that I listened to was about, it's not even data about an individual at this point. We are profiling large classes of society, and that's really disconcerting. And then my last piece, and I'm still figuring this out, but we need to address privacy for our marginalized members of society, because we have different privacy standards. We enforce privacy in neighborhoods of poor people, minorities, more aggressively than we do in a white neighborhood. And that's wrong. So I want that answer in particular. And I think it's something that if you're granting my wish, that you should address that for me, please.
This is definitely the most comprehensive answer I've gotten, and that's fantastic. I love that you're thinking along those lines, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. And the last thing you brought up is really interesting, because I feel like with data and the way, who has access to data or who could do what with data, it's sort of like we're creating like a new caste system in the world. So the people who have data or have access to data will have more access to opportunities where people who don't won't have it. So I think just sort of, like you said, thinking about communities that are more marginalized, trying to figure out how can we, even the playing field, of make sure they have access, to the same things, or the same, like you said, more of a human right as opposed to just a consumer right. So that's fascinating. I love this question because nobody has ever answered it the same way twice. So I may have to do it like a show just about these answers. That's fantastic. So, well, thank you so much for being on the show. I was so excited. We've been planning this for months, so I'm glad we finally got a chance to do this. And
I was honored to be asked, so thank you. It was fun.
Yeah, this is fun. We'll definitely talk soon for sure, and I'll be always looking out for your great sage advice and wisdom, as always.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.